Hey guys, in this video I'm going to be showing you how to knit an easy Celtic braid. Celtic may or may not be the correct terminology for it, so by all means correct me if I'm wrong in the comments below, but we're just going to go with it. A long time ago I did a video about how to knit a Saxon braid, and that's basically a braided cable with 6 interlocking cables. This one is a little bit easier because it's only 4 cables that are interlocking. So it's not quite just a normal braided cable. There's 4 cables that are weaving in and out of each other. So it's just kind of a step up from what you would normally do with a braided cable. It follows a pattern of basically you're stacking X's on top of each other. So the pattern is you're creating one X, and then on top of that you're putting 2 X's, and then on top of that you're putting another X. So it goes 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2. The Saxon braid one, I think it was 2 X's and then 3 X's, 2 X's and then 3 X's. So this one is slightly less complicated, but it can still get a little confusing. So that's what I'm here for. All you're gonna need for this project are your knitting needles and yarn, obviously, but then also a cable knitting needle, or if you don't have one, you can use a pencil or something else, I don't know. First thing you're gonna wanna do is cast on 24 stitches. The actual cable itself is gonna be only 16 stitches wide, but I'm adding on 4 stitches on either end just to have a little bit of a border. And my border is going to be 2 stitches of garter stitch, 2 purls, and then the same thing on this end. It's going to be 2 garters right here and then 2 purls. And then I've got the actual cable right here in the middle. So the actual cable is 16 stitches, so if you want to incorporate that into a project, just make sure that you have enough room for 16 stitches here. The cable, or I guess I should say the braid itself, is made up of 4 different cables, and each cable is 2 stitches wide. So I'm just going to go ahead and get started right on this first row. If you want to knit a couple rows just of plain knitting or stockinette knitting or whatever, just to give you some slack, that's totally fine, but I'm just going to get right into it. So this first row is going to be kind of tight, but I'm going to treat this as if it were the beginning of the pattern. So first I'm going to do just 2 stitches for the garter stitch for the border. So I'm going to knit 2 stitches, and then right after that I'm going to have 2 stitches to be a little buffer right before the braid. So I'm going to purl 2 stitches, because with cable knitting your cables, for the most part, cables are going to look like they are resting on a background of purl stitches. So there's 2 purls, and now I've come to what's going to be my first cable in the braid. So the cable, each cable is going to be 2 stitches wide. So here's 2 stitches, we're going to knit those. So there's 1 knit and 2 knit stitches. Alright. Next up I've got to purl, and we're going to purl for 4 stitches again. Again, we're just jumping in the middle of this pattern, so that's why it's kind of difficult to explain, and I recommend you just follow along with me. So here's 4 purl stitches. This is basically going to be just a gap between the cables. So I've got 1 cable down and then a space, and now I've come to the 2 cables that are going to be in the middle of the braid. So these are going to be 2 cables that are right next to each other, so we're going to knit 4 stitches. So there's 1, 2, 3, and 4 knit stitches. So now we've knit 3 of what are going to be our cables. So we've got 1 here, got 4 purls for the gap, and then 4 knit stitches for 2 cables that are squished together. I am over explaining this, I think. You just need to follow along. So for this last one we're going to purl 4 stitches for the next little space between my last cable. So there's 2, 3, and 4. This yarn is very thick, so everything's really tight, especially for this first row. And then next we're going to knit 2 stitches because this is going to be our last cable. So there's 1 and 2. Alright, so we've done all the cables, and now I'm just going to finish up. You should have 4 stitches left, and I'm just going to do 2 purls again for my border, and then 2 garter stitches at the end. So 2 purls, and then 2 knits right here, 1 and 2. Cool. So turn it over. On the back side, we're going to do the exact same thing we did on the front. The rule, as always, is going to be knit the knits and purl the purls, because we're going to build up a stockinette stitch for the cables. I'm going to speed through this one because I'm just repeating what I just did. The only thing that is going to be different is for the garter stitch, I'm going to knit those stitches. So instead of purling them, I'm going to knit them. That just creates the garter stitch, but that's my border and that's not consequential. For the rest of this row, I'm just going to knit the knits and purl the purls. If you need to learn more about how that works, you can check out a couple other videos I have that explain a little more in depth the difference between knitting and purling. But for now, since I'm just showing you how to do the cable, I'm going to skip through to the next side. Back on the front side, you can just barely see what we have done. We've only built up 2 rows. Even still, we are going to incorporate our knitting needle, our cable knitting needle, with this next row. So things are going to be a little tight, but it's going to pay off. So what we've got is, you can see our border of purls right here, and then right here is our first cable. So those are 2 stockinette stitches. And then in the middle of this, we've got 4 stockinette stitches for the 2 cables that are going to be crossing over each other. And then we've got 4 purls and then 2 knit stitches here for the last cable. So I'm going to get right into it. Let's do our border first. So that's the garter stitch right here. Just knit through here. And then the 2 purls for the background. 1 and 2. For the first cable in the sequence, it's not going to be changing, it's not going to be moving or anything like that, so just knit through it. So 2 knit stitches. And then we come to the gap of 4 purls that we've got here. So we're going to purl 4 stitches. Again, so 1, 2, 3, and 4. Okay, so here comes the big change. It's right in the middle. These 4 knit stitches that we have, we are going to grab the first 2 stitches, so that's going to be the first cable, and we're going to be grabbing it and moving it over the second 2 stitches. So take your cable knitting needle and pick off those 2 stitches, and you can move them to the front or the back, it doesn't really matter. I'm going to move it to the front and knit off the 2 stitches that are behind it. There's 1 and 2. And then bring your cable needle back up to the front and knit those 2 stitches off. So there's 1 and 2. Alright, so we've knit 3 of our cables. The first one is just standing there, not doing anything. The next 2 are crossing over each other. The last one is going to be just standing there, not moving or anything like that either. So we're going to purl those 4 stitches that are the little buffer between the cables again. So there's 4 purls. 1, 2, 3, and 4. And then our last cable here on the row, you're going to knit 2 stitches again, 1 and 2, and then purl 2 stitches for the border, 1 and 2, and then I'm going to knit those last 2 stitches for my garter stitch, 1 and 2. Cool. So before we flip it over, I'm just going to show you a little bit of what we did here. You can kind of see the twist right here, the cable that's going, these 2 stitches are moving over the other 2 stitches, and it's making this twist right here. So turn it over, and we're not going to do anything with our cable needle for this row. We're just going to knit the knits and purl the purls again since it's the back side. So knit through this back side like normal, and then turn it over, and I'll meet you back on the front side. Back on the front side, we're 4 rows in, and you can really see a lot more of what we've built up. This little twist looks a lot better, and then the 2 cables that are on the side. And for this next row, we are going to be using our cable needle again, so bring that in. Basically what we're going to be doing is we've got this first X right here. We're going to be splitting up the X, so these 2 things that have crossed over each other, we're going to move them over 2 stitches each way, so we're going to split them up even more. At the same time, we're going to take these 2 cables that are on the outside and we're going to bring them in as well. So these 2 are going to split up and form pairs with these 2 cables that are on the side. So to do that, you're going to do your little border again. So here's my garter stitch, 2 knits, 1 and 2, and then 2 purls again, 1 and 2. Come to our first cable, and we are going to move this one over because this cable needs to be moving in to the left. So pick off those first 2 knit stitches. So we've got the cable on the cable knitting needle, and we're going to bring it to the front because we want it to move to the left. Put your yarn behind here, and we're going to purl the next 2 stitches behind it. So purl 1 and purl 2. Put the yarn to the back again, and we're going to knit off those stitches from the purl, or from the cable knitting needle. Gosh, getting all my terminology mixed up. So knit those 2 stitches off the knitting needle, the cable knitting needle, 1 and 2. And then immediately after doing that, it's going to feel really weird because everything's going to be twisted and maybe a little tight. We're going to pick off the next 2 purl stitches with our cable knitting needle, because now what we've done is we've reached the X almost, and to split the X up, we want to grab one of the cables and bring it to the right. So to bring it to the right, you want to take the first 2 stitches there and move them to the back. So I've got 2 purl stitches, put them on your cable needle, and gosh, everything's so tight here. Move it to the back like this, and then knit the next 2 stitches. You're knitting because you're knitting the cable. So 1 and 2. So you knit those off, bring up the 2 purls that are on the cable needle and purl those off now. So there's 1 purl, and 2 purls. Okay? You're not done with your cable needle yet. We've got 2 more cables left in our braid, so take your cable needle and pick off the next 2 knit stitches. So this is our 3rd cable in the braid. So 1, 2 knit stitches, and we're going to keep this to the front of our work because this one is going to be moving to the left. So purl the next 2 stitches. There's 1, 2, and then bring up the cable needle and knit off those 2 stitches. So there's 1 knit and 2 knits. Still not done with the cable knitting needle. But this is the last one, I promise. So this is the last cable now in this braid. We want to move this one to the right because it's coming inwards. So pick off the next 2 purl stitches, 1 and 2, and move those to the back so this cable can move 2 stitches to the right. So knit 2, 1 and 2. And then purl off those 2 stitches from the cable needle. If things are feeling tight and messy, then that's a good sign. That is what cable knitting is. It's a lot of just like, I mean, you're basically condensing your work because things are crossing over each other and all that. So there'll be some rippling, there'll be some tightness, but it's all normal. It is all normal. I'm at my border now, so just purl those 2 stitches, 1 and 2, and then for the garter stitch, just knit those, 1 and 2. Cool. When I am doing stuff like this, I like to immediately turn it over and knit the back side, just because first of all, I think I'm afraid of what I've done, and also it's just, everything is just so tight. I like to knit the back side first before I look at everything, just to give it some slack. So on your back side, just knit the knits and purl the purls once again, all the way through. You don't need to do any cabling or anything like that. The one thing you do need to do though is just pay attention to the knits that you're knitting and the purls that you're purling. Because you've changed some things around, you should be able to tell where the purls are that you need to purl and where the knits are that you need to knit. But it's not going to follow the same pattern just because you've moved all those cables around. So just be careful what you're knitting and what you're purling. And I will see you on the front side. Back on the front side, and here we go. Now it's starting to actually look like something. We've got our 4 different cables. These 2 have crossed over each other, and these 2 on the side are coming inwards. And now we're all set up to do 2 X's for this next row. So let's do the garter stitch again here for the border. There's 2 knits, 2 purls, do-do-do, do-do-do. Next, we've reached our cable almost. We've got 2 purls actually because of what we've done on the last row. So you're going to purl those 2 stitches because that's the background. So 1 purl and 2 purls. Now we've reached 4 knit stitches because these are our 2 cables that have come together right here. And right off the bat, we're going to bring back in our cable needle, and we're going to have this outside cable right here crossing underneath this inside cable here. So take your 2 stitches off to grab this whole cable, 1 and 2, bring it to the back because we want it to go underneath the next cable, and then knit 2 stitches to bring the cable over. So 1 and 2. Bring the cable needle back up and knit those 2 stitches. So 1 and 2. Okay, so you've made another cross right here. Next, we've got 4 purl stitches. That is going to be right in the middle. So there's 1 purl, 2 purls, 3 purl, and a 4th purl. We've come to our last 2 cables, and for this one, the inside cable here, this first cable, is going to go underneath the outside cable. So the outside cable is going to go over the top. So take your cable needle again and take off those 2 knit stitches and bring them to the back of the work and knit the next 2 stitches to bring the cable over, and then bring back up the cable and knit those 2 stitches off. And then to finish up the row, we're just going to purl 4 stitches. You're purling 4 because your background has been added to because of the crossing we did earlier. So there's 2 purls, or 3 purls. This is the 4th purl, and then just the garter stitch for the border here on the end. I feel like I'm totally just mumbling to myself at this point. Once again, on the back side, you're just going to knit the knits and purl the purls once more, just being careful to always knit the knits and purl the purls because you've crisscrossed everything, so they're not always going to be in the same place. So just be careful, and I'll see you again on the front. Jumping right back into this new row, we're going to break up these 2 X's right after we've crossed them. So again, you're going to use your cable needle and break these 2 X's up. So, do the border again. Hopefully by now you're starting to see the pattern forming, and you might be able to just kind of continue on your own. If not, that is okay, I'm still here. So you're going to do the border, so that's 2 knits, 2 purls, and now we've reached 2 purl stitches, and then after those 2 purl stitches is the first X right here. So we're going to break up this X here. To do that, we're going to grab these 2 purls from the background and bring it in 2 stitches. So take your cable knitting needle again and pick off those 2 purl stitches. 1 and 2, bring it to the back, and knit 2 stitches. So that breaks up the cross that we've got. 2 knits, and then bring up the needle, the cable needle, and purl off those 2 stitches. 2 purls. Okay? Basically, we're recreating that initial buffer that was between the cables. So for the next one, we've got the second cable here. We're going to grab those 2 stitches, and we're going to move this one over to the left to further split up the X. So bring that to the front, and we're going to purl 2 stitches. 1 and 2, and then knit off the 2 stitches from the cable. You're not done with your cable knitting needle yet. So we've split up that X. Actually, if you look back on it, you can really see that it's already kind of split up nicely. There's a nice little X symbol right here. We're going to do the same for these last two cables that are on this cross. So immediately after we've got two purls here, you're going to grab those with your cable needle again. I told you you're never going to put down your cable needle for this project. That's why I love these types of braids, because every row of the front you're using the cable needle to do something. So it never gets boring. So I'm going to knit these two stitches now. Bring up my cable needle and purl those stitches. And then for the last arm, it's tempting just to leave it there, but we are going to pick off those two stitches and we're going to bring them to the left. So I'm going to purl two stitches. And then knit off the two stitches from the purl, or from the cable needle. Knit and knit. And then to finish off the row, you've got two purls and then two knit stitches for the garter stitch on the end. I'm going to once again knit through the back side, and then I'll meet you back on the front and we'll take a look. Back on the front, and believe it or not, but you have come full circle. We're back at the beginning. This is how we started. So we've got 4 stitches in the middle here that are knit stitches, and they are ready to be crossed over. We've got 2 cables that are on the sides, and that's exactly how we started out with this row. We had 4 in the middle and then 2 on the side. So you're going to knit through that first cable just like normal. You're not going to use the cable needle on it at all. You're going to just knit like normal until you get to the first X in the middle. So take the needle and we're going to cross one over the other. So the first one is going to go over the top of the second cable. Or I guess the second cable is going to go over the top of the third cable. So knit those off. And I'm kind of speeding through this because hopefully you are able to make it on your own with this. But if not, that's totally okay. Knit those off. And then we've got 4 purl stitches here. Basically just knit all the way through to the end here. So purl, purl, purl. The last cable here is just going to stand on its own. He's not going to move at all. So knit those 2 stitches. And then we've got the border. So 2 purls and then the 2 garter stitches. So on the back side, you're just going to knit all the way through to the end like normal once again. So hopefully this was all helpful to you and made sense. I like this braid because it's interesting, it's impressive. It doesn't look like just a normal braided cable, even though a braided cable looks cool. Like all cables I think look really cool. But this one is just kind of a little extra special because it's a little extra complicated, but it's not as difficult as like the Saxon braid or any of those other special kind of Celtic inspired braids that are out there. This one is fairly predictable and you can kind of pick it up on your own without needing to follow a written instruction or anything like that. So I've reached the end of this, and I'm just going to turn it around. We'll take one final look at it here. And yeah, so that's the pattern. We've got an X here, we've got an X here, an X here, and we just broke up this new X right here. At this point, what you would do to keep going is you would just repeat what we have done. So you would break up this X even more, so bring these two cables here, bring them together to form another X right here, and you'd bring up these two cables here to form an X here, and then just keep going and weaving and weaving and weaving. Here's an example of this in real life, I guess, in an actual project that I'm working on. I did a video on this just recently, a couple weeks ago, and this is just kind of a personal project that I'm working on, so it's also kind of an experimental one because the border is a little weird, but just we won't even talk about that. But basically, you can see this is what we've just done. I built this up. It's a little bit smaller just because I'm using a smaller knitting needle and a smaller piece of yarn, but it's following this same pattern of 4 cables weaving and braiding over each other. It might help if I hold these up to each other. I don't know, maybe not. But as you can see, it's following the same pattern that this one is following. So we've got a series of X's, 2 X's and then 1 X, 2 X's and then 1 X, 2 X's and then 1 X at the top. Just one last little tip actually that I didn't explain before, but if you're confused about which cable should go over, whether a cable should be going over the top or the bottom of a cable, just look at what the cable has been doing. If the cable has already gone over one cable, so like, say for instance this section right here, this little arm, this one has gone over this cable right here, so right after he goes over this cable, he needs to go under the next cable. The rule is basically over and then under, over and then under. So if a cable has just gone over a cable, the next cable it meets, it should go under the cable. Obviously that's not like a huge rule and you can break it depending on the pattern that you want to make, but that's the pattern that I'm following here. I'm having a cable go over one, and then under the next one that it meets up. So hopefully this was helpful to you. Let me know if you have any questions or comments below, and I'll see you next time.